So you like the fat boys? Welcome back to the channel. It's Richie here from Dowie After Dark, and today I am joined by the infamous Jack Cropper.
Not sure I'd say infamous, but I'll take it.
Well, pretty infamous in their 8th edition circle anyway. So Jack has been running the Ogres lately. So if you're interested in Ogre Kingdoms, he is your man.
I certainly trying to be. Not quite straightforward to just suddenly be the man, I don't think.
Well, you are currently the top ranked Ogre Kingdoms player in the UK at the moment, so you're obviously doing something right anyway.
Or just lack of competition.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, mate. I think I think they're really good. So me and Jack had a game last weekend at the Square Based event, and I personally think the army's actually quite decent. I know, obviously, I'm not playing one of the like super meta build armies, but it was probably the toughest game out all weekend, and it was a good fun game. It was nice to see the Ogres. Actually, I've never played against them before.
No, I've not played against them either yet, which is why I sort of thought I'd get them out of the cupboard and sort of throw them on the table and see if they're as terrible as everyone's sort of saying they are.
Yeah, that's fair. How is your experience with it so far?
So I've taken them to two GTs so far. So the first one was 2 or 3 months ago, and I went 3 and 2, which was
Nice.
a surprise to everyone. So that was surprisingly good. And then I sort of went away, tweaked the list a little, sort of having figured out some of the sort of the rough parts of what I faced that weekend and what I just couldn't touch. So I went away, tweaked the list, filled it in between with a few triple dragons and some beastmen, that sort of stuff, just to keep the palate cleansed. And then I just thought I'd bring him back last weekend, and I bought myself a few more toys to sort of fill out my amended list, and brought them back. Went 4-1, narrowly missing out on the 5-0 from because of yours truly. But it was a good game, close game, and I think they've got some legs. You don't get that many legs on the table. It's surprisingly shocking how small the army is when you put it down. Like, I'm used to playing Beastmen, whereas Chaos, where there's a lot on the table and you've got a lot of things to fall back on, and if you're in a panic, you're like, okay, I'll just throw this in the way. Whereas this is one block, a few bits, and then you're sort of like, oh okay, well, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with that? And it gives you a few more things to think about than your standard sort of meta lists that are a bit more, not push and play, but some of them are a bit more.
Yeah, definitely a bit more ABC. So while we're talking about your army, can you run us through your army list that you went 4-1 with?
So character-wise, we had the big boy tyrant. So I put him on the Thunder Tusk this time. So I had him on the Stonehorn last time. It was really good. The Stonehorn, the sort of D3 wounds sort of get -1 off. So it's really good for cannons, ogre blades, that sort of stuff. But the Thunder Tusk, I think, gives you a bit more play against enemy characters, which seems to be what I mainly get him into. So he gives -1 weapon skill and initiative in the stuff he's in base contact with. So it just means that a lot of time instead of you being struck on 3s and you striking on 4s, it sort of flips it round. Or sometimes into infantry, you can be striking on 2s if you get them down to weapon skill 2, that sort of thing. So that sort of gives a bit of strength there. So Tyrant on the Thunder Tusk, 5-up ward, protection. He's got the Tenderizer, which is the sort of big ogre weapon that's basically an ogre blade on steroids. And he has the Death Cheater mark, which means I can reroll a wound per game, which I never remember. So that's probably 5 points I don't need to have because I just never remember it. I mean, I'm sure I'd remember it if I got monster killers, but just standard like normal combat, I'm like, yeah, wound, cool. And then at the end of the game, I'm like, I didn't need to take those wounds. Then I've got Slaughtermaster level 4 who has the Spell Eater X, so he gives magic res 2, and he sits within the unit. I'll talk about it in a minute. He has the Law Familiar, so he's picking his spells. He also has Death Cheater, which I never remember to use.
So and some wasted points there.
And he runs Battle Magic. Previously, I'd taken a loot, but I found the biggest weakness in the list that I had was having no range, and I just couldn't pick up points. I'd get units down to 1 model, 2 models, and they'd just run away, and I just couldn't pick up those points. So I thought, Bring in pillar, bring in fireball, and hopefully that'll sort of give me a bit more something just to pick up those extra few points. And they're Bruiser BSB with the war banner. So a bit of combat res. Ogres are a hard army to get static combat res because it's very rare you're going to have 3, 4, 5 ranks of ogres because they're so expensive. So just to try and counter, just to give me any sort of advantage against when a dragon comes flying in, I just needed to try and get as much static res in there as I could. So he has the armor of meteoric iron, so it's got that static 5 up armor save. The demon slayer scars, so that he causes terror. Which I forgot about for the whole event as well. So that could have been useful in some of the charges, and when people are charging me, when dwarves are charging me potentially, and the unit strength of my unit is so big that everyone should have been taking fear checks to charge me.
Well, the only problem with the Demon Slayer scars is because it makes the model have terror, and obviously you don't get the majority. But if he pops out the unit, then he would cause terror, which is pretty nice, I think.
Oh yeah, that's valid. Also, the Death Cheater on him. So that's 15 points there, which I just forget to use every game. So potentially I could do something with those. But I'm sure at some point there'll be a killing blow or a heroic killing blow where it actually comes in clutch.
So basically, what you're saying is you went 4-1 and you had a points disadvantage because of the points you weren't using.
So we'll go to core. So I have 4 units of Saber Tusks, for just two Saber Tusks, times 4. 3 with scouts and 1 with ambush. So I think these are really good. I come from Beastmen with the Razor Gore, which are my favourite sort of units in probably any army. I think they're really good. And the Saber Tusks are, and I guess, Ogre's version of those, but they've got a few drawbacks, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But they're solid. They're great for just throwing down, hunting, war machines, redirecting, that sort of stuff. But yeah, they've got a few drawbacks. And then the sort of big beastie of the army is a block of 12 Ogre Bulls Iron Fists. So they have a 5 up armor save and get an extra attack. So 4 attacks each. 5 up armor save. They've got full command in there with a Lookout Nobler, just because I've got 2 characters in there. So if they got whittled down to less than 3, I'll still get those Lookout saves. And
I think if that unit gets whittled down to 3, I think you've lost by that point.
I don't know. Like, it's still not really giving up that many points. Like, if I can keep them all, like, when it gets below 3, yeah, then it's an issue. I'm giving up some points, but I'm usually okay. I don't think they went down, other than our game, which was where they got chased down rather than actually got beaten, like got wiped out. They never got wiped out. And they have the Cannibal Totem in there, so they've got a 5 up armor save and a 5 up regen. And with the Battle Magic, I'm always picking the Oaken Shield. So they've got a 5 up ward save as well. So they've got that triple stack save in there, which is usually reserved for dragons. So I sort of got that block. I've got 2 ranks in there, 2 banners, the war banner. So I've got a static res of 5. And then hopefully with those triple saves, if a dragon comes into me, I'm not actually taking 7, 8, 9 wounds. I might only take 4 or 5, and I might actually be able to hold the dragon. That was the intention of that sort of block. And it's just great for points denial. You've basically got 1,000 points sat in that block, and if that doesn't die, you're very unlikely to lose the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard block to kind of deal with. Like, is it about like 30 wounds, 35 wounds, maybe?
Yeah, it starts off like 40 wounds. 40 plus
yeah,
wounds.
like it's just ridiculous. Like, especially with a triple save, like it's going to be really hard to get through that. Yeah, like when we were in our combat, for instance, like I was using my great weapons against you, and I think I only killed 2.
Yeah,
like killed 2. Obviously,
with
you
the king.
rolled.
That's probably the king.
Yeah, that was probably the king. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you did absolutely. Like your dice rolls just kind of went against you in our game. With basically, for anyone who doesn't know, Jack failed a re-rollable 9-up leadership test when he was breaking. Failed both, rolled like an 11 and a 12, and then rolled a 3 on his on his flea, and then the speedy little dwarves managed to run over the top of him. But that was just purely down to dice. So that could have gone either way.
Oh yeah, and averages, I'm going to be okay, and my tyrant then is charged into your flank, and sort of I'm probably winning the combat in the next round. So it was very, very close.
We did actually play the combat through, so we finished the game then because the game was pretty much done. But we carried on, did the next turn as if the unit had fibgoed, and slamming the tyrant into the side. And yeah, I did actually lose the combat. So if Jack's dice had been better, then the ogres would actually have beat me. So that was. I definitely think they're quite good. I think people have just written the army off early on, like they've done quite a few of the armies. But then good players like yourself are kind of coming forward, showing people that you can play those armies. You've just got to use different tactics from previous editions with those armies, and also different tactics than other armies.
Exactly. I think everyone got so used at the start of the edition to seeing multiple small unit armies, whereas ogres, I don't think they can play MSU. So like these big blocks is the way to play them. So yes, we've got those bulls, and then the creme de la creme is the 2 Ironblasters. Just to help me, just as I said before, I struggle with range, and this just gives me something that draws other armies to me a lot of the time. These are 6 wound cannons, so a lot of the time I'm winning the artillery fights, even with things that have got 2-3 more times artillery than me. I'm killing them before they can kill them, and then they've got to come to me to get the points.
Yeah, I mean, those are basically better Empire cannons, really. I know, obviously, that they've got a harsher miscast table. Not miscast table,
Misfire, yeah.
harsher misfire, but they're really good. The fact you can move and shoot. So they're basically like the X-Force cannons, but obviously loads better because the Dwarf cannons are shit. like they're so good. And I talk about this a lot with like the other good players they get on the channel. When you've got range projection, you're adding agency into the game, and I think that's something that you need to add into your lists, because you're controlling the pace. Like if you can shoot them from a distance, they need to come and get those points. They can't just sit back. Like in our game, I had to go up and get them. Like tactically, it was probably the wrong decision on my half to go after the cannons, but that was a point that you forced because you had the agency of those 2 cannons. You were going to win that range battle.
Yeah, and if you ignore them, they're coming to this flank with D6+1, strength 6 impact hits. Like they're not to be sniffed at either, as like you can't ignore them. They're not only giving me that range, they're something to give me that counter punch, or if you turn your back on them, they will come through and they'll kill a lot of things.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, even if they misfire, they just suddenly turn into a chariot with a Rhinox at the front, right?
If you're lucky. I think
Yeah.
a 1 and a 2 they just blow up, so that's 200 points just gone. 3 and a 4 the cannon breaks, and a 5 and a 6 a Noblog gets stuck in the cannon, and you can't shoot that turn. So I think only once all event I rolled a misfire. Well, I rolled a lot for the bounce. So in the old edition, you used to get 2 bounce, like you used to be able to roll twice on the stuff because it shot multi balls out. So it's been downgraded in that you still only get that one line of ball with the cannon, but they're still decent. So only once I actually blew a cannon off the top of the chariot, so I was quite lucky in that. But a lot of the games I didn't actually spend shooting a lot of the turns. I just crept them up, kept them as the counter charge, and with Arcane Urgency you can potentially move 12 inches, get a completely different shooting arc, and sort of get something else. So yeah, they're decent.
I think they're really good. Like they've just got a lot of utility, whether that be the counter charge like you were using them for, or just absolutely spanking cannonballs down the field. I think a lot of armies, because obviously people are like, oh, it's an ogre cannon, whatever, and all this kind of stuff. How many armies in the game would love to have one of those? Like
Yeah.
I would love that. Like if I had a strength 10 cannon with a chariot underneath it, like I'd be an auto take for a
Get
dwarf
those
army.
dwarf carts in upgraded.
Yeah, I know.
So overall, I was quite happy with the list. I think going forward, I'd probably swap the bulls back to Iron Guts. I think that was my main takeaway, is that they get into combat and they just don't do anything. They've got a lot of attacks, but not much AP. They've got armor bane 1, so like against Empire with armor, I just bounce off them, and I've got to rely on the character. So the BSB had a great weapon, and he was pretty much the only thing that could chip through armor. And obviously the tyrant can, but he's usually off on his own, chasing something else down. So I think I'd go back to Iron Guts, but there is a minimum core of 3 bulls, so you can't get that amount of models into the unit. If you go Iron Guts, like you probably get 8 or 9 rather than 12. So it's not quite as efficient. Like there's that other 105 points for the Ogre Bulls that are quite easy to take points from. So the points denial of the list suddenly suddenly tweaks.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I think the strongest armies in the game compared to what are the perceived weakest army of the game, kind of the major difference. Whereas the core that you need to take, so like the core tax, is really good in the armies that are probably performing the best.
Yeah,
Whereas
it's
the
Forsaken.
perceived weaker armies, it's the core tax that's really kind of dragging you down.
Yeah,
Because 3 ogres is actually quite pricey, really. And
yeah,
then by the time that you've invested that into your iron guts, you suddenly, what is it like? Probably, I would say, probably like 3 iron guts, 4 iron guts less, probably.
yeah. I got to a bit more expensive than Bull, so you're suddenly down to 8 or 9 in that unit rather than 12, which is a lot less wounds. But I think maybe they get a bit more respect than Ogre Bulls. Like, not as many things are going to come charging in when, especially with that triple save. And then if Dragon comes in, I'm 4 wide maybe. They might kill one. They might kill one Iron Gut, and then they're probably facing 9 Strength 6 AP 2 attacks back. So like, yeah, like the favor then suddenly, yeah, I quite fancy my chances then
Yeah,
against
yeah.
Dragon.
So it could definitely be worth going back to them and just trying it, maybe even with less of them.
Yeah, I think we've got the 3K event at the start of January, so
Yes.
I think the Iron Guts might make a reappearance there, where they've just got that bit much more points to sort of utilize.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, I like your list for that with the extra Mornfanging and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite
My
an easy tweak.
Yeah, mine's literally just one like 19 hammerers and an anvil. Nice.
Yeah, like that. Those anvils are horrific. It's so hard to do, especially when it's like I'll go in. Oh, toughness 10. Yeah, you did say that. I can't wound you. Oh yeah, like I'm so used to the old editions where like you can always wound on 6, and they're like, it'll be fine. I'll get in there. I'll just chip some wounds. I've got good combat res. Unbreakable. Can't wound it. Oh, sweet. Yeah. um.
Yeah,
So
so in the 3K tournament, I'm going to do one toughness 10, one toughness 9, so it should be all
ugh, disgusting.
right.
So yeah. So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. The Saber Tusks, I'm enjoying using those. However, they come with Impetuous, um, which makes them a bit harder to utilize than a Razor Gore or something like that. So you've really got to. Obviously, they can go skirmish, they can go close order, and I quite like them in marching column. Like movement 8, suddenly get a 24-inch redirector can be really useful, especially because they're so small frontage. Like the wheels on them is like it costs nothing basically to suddenly like get in the way and then do a nice wheel to send something else in a different direction. Um, but yeah, trying to find that balance. Like the first time I went to, I just kept being like, oh, I've messed up. He's got to charge off that way. Oh, I've messed up. He's got to charge off that way. So I made much more a point this time to really look at terrain and think, okay, if I want to start off in skirmish, I've got to be hid behind this terrain because obviously a lot of them are scout and you can't charge first turn. So first turn's usually fine, but it's then thinking that second turn, where do I need to be? Where if I want to charge that, I can only see that, or if I don't want to charge anything, I need to be somewhere where I can't see anything and not get drawn out of position. Or I've got to think, okay, Richie might move something here to actually draw me out of like draw a charge out of me, and so yeah, it's actually quite difficult, sort of thinking ahead to make sure that they stay where they are and they'll be able to utilize for the purpose you want them, whether that's redirecting or hunting them artillery. Like I managed to get your grudge thrower. I had a game against orcs and goblins where they just ran riot in the backlines and doom divers and rock lobbers. So they're really good for the purpose that you use. It's just a lot harder to use than some of the other stuff.
Yeah, no, I think they're really good. Like the way that you're using them in marching columns, so it was just like two of them with one behind the other one, just kind of darting around. Like you managed to get out of Impetuous a couple of times because you positioned them so they weren't in line of sight to me as going in. Like that was really cool. I really like that. So then you could kind of dart them around the front of me and then try and redirect. And I definitely think that that's an amazing use for them. You hear a lot online, like in the Discords and on the Facebook, the redirecting's dead in this edition. I completely disagree. Redirecting is super strong. And if you're good at that, then you can definitely win games.
Yeah, until you face something that's drilled, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm great. I've pointed them in the wrong direction, and then it just suddenly goes 5 miles wide, and I'm like, oh, that overrun that they couldn't make before is going to come crashing into my cannon.
Yeah, I mean there is obviously a limit to drilled. because obviously you can only move the back rank out. So like with dwarves, I can only move 6 inches. High elves can obviously drill out even further, so you can have bigger units that drill out. But there is it all comes down to kind of like a maths game then, and trying to work it out and work out inches and stuff, which obviously on the tabletop kind of nobody's got time for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, especially when you're on game 4 or game 5, and your brain's not quite functioning, and those sort of things just go out of your head, and you're just like, yeah, that'd be fine. I've worked that perfectly, and then suddenly they just sort of sprout wider and get that clip on the overrun. It can be a bit of a shock.
It's like, oh God. So basically the play that Jack's referring to is I did a multi-charge into the 2 cannons, and basically he fled with both. No, you fled with one, didn't you?
One
So
of them,
fled with one.
we couldn't work out how we chose which one you sort of chased after, and one sort of ran a direction where I didn't want you to be chasing, and one sort of went a direction where I wanted you to chase. So I just fled with the one that I wanted to get out of the way, and then it seemed to give me it seemed to send you off towards the edge of the table, away from everything else. But yeah, you suddenly redressed your ranks at the end of combat and managed to sort of get the clip on the model that previously you'd have just run straight past, which is obviously something very different from previous editions. Like this redress is a brand new mechanic, so it's something that's still sort of it still jumps up and tricks you a few times. I don't use any armies that have it available, so it's not something that I've sort of really got my head around yet, because I've not had to explore the possibilities of what I can do going the other way.
That's the thing. It's like so like if I was to charge for anyone who doesn't know, so basically if I'm in marching column, say I'm 5 wide, so I've got a unit that's like 30-man dwarf unit, so 20, 25, 28 longbeards, for instance, and then I've got my king in there as well, and then a character, so it's up to about 30 models. I can be 5 wide in marching column, and then I can expand my frontage by 5 when I charge, because I've got drilled. So suddenly I'm 10 wide, and then when I follow up or pursue, I can then expand by 5. Again, obviously, you've got to keep the center the same. So you're coming out, and these are back models. So you need to make sure that you've got 6 inches from those back guys. So when you're playing this, you need to make sure that you do. Throughout every game that I play, I always make sure that I mark 6 inches from those models, just to make sure that it actually does happen. Because sometimes you can get to a point, and I usually find it's about I would say after 15, 16 wide, you really struggle to actually be able to do it. I think you can get to I think it's like 18 wide from a big unit, but that means that that's when the last model that can possibly go out equally goes. So you would be equal, and then it'd be one more on one side, and then that's your lot really, and that's pretty much as much as you can do. Plus, the only way to get back into a marching column from then is literally, I think it's like 3 maneuvers. So that's when like an anvil comes in use for that.
Yeah, getting that sort of extra movement spell going off. But yeah, the thing, like, you're suddenly 5 wide, and then at the end of combat you're 15 wide, and then like you just don't plan it. Like you don't plan for that sort of change in frontage with your angles and stuff. So it's really interesting to sort of play against that, and I won't fall for it twice.
No, I wouldn't expect you to, mate. You are a really good player. So what are your standout units in the list? I know obviously you really, really liked your Tyrant. I only managed to do a few wounds to him, and was very scared of that model, actually.
Yeah,
It definitely looked like it's obviously not as defensible not as defensive as a dragon, but definitely looked like it had a lot more raw output.
yeah. So I think in our game it was the only game where I took the regen signature spell, just because those Iron Drakes are a terrifying prospect. So at that point I was, most of the time I had the triple save on him as well as the unit, which which is obviously very handy. Um, yeah, I don't think he's ended up in a one-on-one with a dragon yet, so I haven't got to test how that goes. Like, in theory, the tenderizer and the -1 weapon skill, I think it's a 50-50 time flip. Like, he's got 9 wounds, toughness 6. He's got, if he's got that triple stack save, which I would probably take if I was playing against a dragon. Yeah, I honestly think it's just, if they don't kill me first, then I think I've got a good chance with those D3 wounding. Like, he's got six attacks, D3 wounds each. Like, it's it's gonna it's going to shave skin off people.
Oh yeah, definitely. For those of you that don't know, Jack, do you want to explain the tenderizer?
Strength +2, AP 3, extra attacks +1, gives you magical attacks, multiple wounds D3, and strike last. So the majority of the time, you are probably striking after the dragon, or at least after the rider of whatever dragon is coming into you, because the majority of the time they're probably going to be charging you because you're a lot less maneuverable than them. I'm on a movement 6, swift stride monster, but I can't fly. So if I'm getting the charge, someone's messed up, or I've held them in combat with my bulls. They've expected to plow through me, but my static combat res and triple saves held him in place, and then suddenly he might go flying in the side. So yeah, so the stat line can be pretty impressive. Like there's nothing else in the game that that's got a stat line like a tyrant. Just missing that fly. I think if he had fly, then it'd be horrific.
Yeah. So I'd say the tyrant is basically the dragon, and the Stonehorn is basically the rider. So
Yeah,
the kind of stats are flipped, really,
yeah. I
aren't
like
they?
the Stonehorn's not like the Thunder Tusk's not that bad. Like I took the Stonehorn initially, but that's got impact hits but not stomps.
Yeah.
Whereas the Thunder Tusk has D3 impact hits and 3 stomps. So I found a lot of the time I was never getting the charge. So those impact hits were just a waste of points, really. Not
Yeah.
like built into the model. Like it's 50 points more for the Stonehorn than the Thunder Tusk. So I found that those impact hits were very rarely getting used, whereas the stomps actually, can be quite
Like
useful.
it's always the stomps that do the damage as well. Like you can fight against the dragon fails all of its attacks because you got to roll for them, and then suddenly it'll get 6 or 7 stomps going into you, and
Yeah,
you're like, brilliant.
yeah. So yeah, it's not quite competing with a dragon, but with the guy on top, I think it balances out. So
Yeah, I
they
think
should
so.
make for
Like
some quite fun fights.
definitely a quite a scary prospect, I think. Like it's
Yeah,
a good model. It's a really good model. It's definitely a lot stronger than I think people give it credit for.
yeah, and again, it's just another 500-600 point model that's denying points. So like my easy points in my army are my Saber Tusks, which is 4 units of 38 points. After that, you've got to fight for those points. Like the Ironblasters are 195 point each, but they're not going down without a fight. And then you've got to get through the bull or the bulls or the tyrant, and again, 40 wounds in the bull unit, or nine very hard wounds on the tyrant to get through.
Yeah, I mean, like you're never ever going to double outnumber the bull
No,
unit,
no.
so you're always going to either be giving ground or fall back in good order as long as you roll well. So
Yeah,
as
yeah,
long
that's
as
the
you
thing.
can,
With the leadership 9, if you're within 18 inches of the general, 90% of the time, or I'm sure some statistician will tell me otherwise, but more than average, a lot more than average, you should be fine.
just like 72% of the time.
So it's dice rolls though. So I had a similar sort of got into a similar position in my 5th game against Michael's Beastman, and managed to he got me down to a leadership 5 test on the tyrant, which we actually played it wrong because he was in the river, so all his ranks would have disappeared. So it actually wouldn't have been that bad, but I managed to pass a leadership 5 in that instant, so it balanced out over the 2 games. So
Yeah,
I
this
can't.
is one of the things about like competitive players who go to lots of tournaments. Like we tend to not get too upset if it doesn't go in our way, like because you can have the best tactics in the world, but if the dice don't want it,
Yeah.
you won't get it.
No, and yeah, that's just one of the things you've got to understand about Warhammer, that it is a dice roll in the end of the game. You can have 90% better tactics, but someone you fail your ward save and suddenly you lose your best piece, and whatever you planned for, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, you just kind of start to crumble, don't you? So,
um,
what are your tactics going forward then? So, with your list, how would you deploy? And what would be your kind of like high priority targets? And where do you think you would kind of sit in like terrain and stuff?
yeah, so obviously I've not got many drops. I've got characters, I've got the bulls, and I've got the iron blasters. So I'm on a 4 drops because all the sabers are scout or ambush. Um, so a lot of the time I'm finishing dropping first, although I think out of the 2 tournaments I've taken to so far, I think I've gone first once out of the 10 games, even though I've had the +1. So that doesn't help. But usually I'll sort of, yeah, it's difficult. It depends what I'm playing against. If I'm playing against something with artillery, I'll probably deploy a bit differently than otherwise. I'll try and sort of put the Ironblasters quite wide out, just to give me decent firing lanes, because the majority of the time I'm going to be deployed before they've had to deploy theirs. So I've got to sort of maximize my potential, and I know that I can take 2 or 3 shots from their artillery and still probably get my shots back at them. So I can risk, I don't have to sort of double up quite as much on sort of putting them both together. Whereas if I'm playing something where maybe they've not got quite as much range against me, I might actually deploy them quite tight to the balls and use them as that sort of, I'll fire off a few shots initially. If there's no sort of major high targets, I might fire through some knights or something like that, and then just use them as, I know my bull block isn't going to flee, or hopefully isn't going to flee, so they can take a front charge. I'll fall back in good order, and then I've got those two heavy chariots to go in the flank of whatever's attacking me if I've lost combat. And then the sort of Sabertus will, again, depending on what I'm up against, if there's artillery, they're probably going to trying to find a gap in the back lines, or, with the movement 8, so they're not slow, so they don't even have to be in the back lines. I just have to find somewhere where I can tuck them up, hide them, so they're not going to get killed in turn 1, and then usually I can march them 16, 24 inches and get them into the back lines for that sort of turn 2, turn 3 charges, and I know my army's probably going to survive that amount of turns of shooting from artillery, so I'm not that concerned. The sort of biggest risk is cannons into my tyrant. So depending on if there's cannons, he might sit behind a bit of terrain for a turn or 2, or just deploy in a way where, unless they cram all their artillery in a certain position on the board, he's probably not going to get hit by everything. So if it forces them to cluster up, then that gives my Sabertus a better, easier time for sort of sniffing up points early on in the game. And again, that just then forces their army to have to come forward and sort of advance and sort of play into my sort of edge of the map. And then at that point, hopefully I've lined myself up with decent counter charge options. And like the Ogres, they're quite fast, movement 6, so a lot of the time I'm going to be outdistancing any enemy infantry, but cavalry not so much. They'll probably have the advantage on me with Swift Stride, in which case my tyrant will sort of be sat there as well for a counter charge threat, because he's moving 6 with Swift Stride, so he might not sort of have that full range, but if you give me a charge, he's probably going to take it, because even if he fails, he's probably going to be close enough that I don't care if you come into me. I'll just chop you apart the next turn.
I think units going into him, he's probably fine. I'm a little bit disappointed this edition that Ogres don't have countercharge, actually. Like, I would have assumed, considering like you kind of rely on the impact hits and like the big bulk of the stomach plates going in. I thought all of the Ogres would have had countercharge.
Yeah,
we should petition for that. Ogres countercharge.
Yeah, I guess there's sort of like, Marvel Juggernaut, where they've got to build up that impetus before they can sort of get those impact hits.
I'm an ogre tyrant, bitch.
So I'm not surprised they don't, but it would be a nice addition. But given that, I think it might be something that would get introduced in an arcane journal if there were a supported army potentially, or even it'd be nice to just have it on man-eaters or something like that, which I just currently I don't think they're quite as efficient to sort of run man-eaters. Monfang are the next thing I want to try, just to see how they sort of stand up. They've sort of took a bit of a nerf from previous editions, and the armor saves sort of been pinged down a point or 2, so they're not quite as defensible as your demigriffs and that sort of stuff. They've got the
I think
balance out a bit, but like on a 4 armor save, even fireballs are going to get half the wounds through, and like they're still only toughness 4. So I'm not sure how well they'll fare.
I think they definitely should have had either a 5-up or a 6-up regen, just for like how big the Mornfang is meant to be. Like, they should have got that, or even because they've got is it Armored Hide 2 that they have?
No, so they've just got heavy armor and Armored Hide 1.
Is it just Armored Hide 1? Like they should, like GW, come on.
Yeah. So I mean, you can put the regen banner on them, and they've got Swift Stride, which cancels out the so the regen banner has a sort of negative to it where you can use 1d6 to overrun. But one thing have Swift Stride, which sort of makes it that not too bad an issue. But I want that on my bull unit. I want that on my sort of points denial block. That's trying to keep those points safe. So and I don't think you could just take the regen spell as a signature and hope you can get all those ducks lined up. But if I go, instead of just having that base 5 up with the potential to get the war save off as well, if the regen banner is elsewhere and I'm relying on 2 spells to get that triple save, then it suddenly becomes a lot harder, especially if someone's running around with an Infernal Puppet or something like that. Then if they're just there on a 5 up armor save, a lot of stuff's just going to plow through them because they're only toughness 4 and they're slow. So it's very rare that I'm going to be striking first, especially if I run Iron Guts. Then it becomes a risky game.
Yeah, I mean, if you were doing high risk to high reward, like the Razor banner on the bulls would be quite cool, because obviously 4 attacks each, you're going to get some 6s.
Yeah, it's an option, but I think, but then you're giving up either your regen or your war banner. Yeah, potentially war banner is something that's not needed, but we're dreaming for that static combat res of 6 or 7. I will never get there, but we'll try and get as close as we can.
Yeah, I think the that dream of 7 is just kind of game wide, isn't it? There's to be fair, there's not actually that many armies that can do it, really.
No, I played Jack's Skaven with a 9 static combat res at the sort of game two of that event. And sort of he charged into my tyrant with those, expecting to sort of kill me and run me down. But I'd taken up a defensive position on the hill for that +1 combat res, and that sort of that saved me. And then
So
yeah.
for anyone at home, if you haven't been playing this, so if you're on a hill and your model is entirely, or unit is entirely on the hill at the beginning of combat, you get +1 combat res because you have the high ground. So basically at that point you turn into Obi-Wan Kenobi and fuck up Anakin, who's coming up that hill.
Yeah, I mean the sort of height that I've got on the back of that stone or tyrant, I should have the high ground built in. Like I should just have a static +1 combat res for that. But yeah, like it's just small things like that being aware of your terrain pieces. I think everyone, to be honest, in that tournament forgot that the river would be breaking ranks for units. So I would have actually been a lot more aggressive in that central ground. Whereas against some of those blocks, I've got the big static res. But yeah, just being like, oh, actually, there's a hill there. If I move back an inch, that actually puts me in a position where I'm pretty comfortable. That by the time I've got max overkill on his throwaway champion, plus that combat res, plus my close order, I'm probably going to be on a 7 or 8 rerollable, and I'm quite comfortable with that. So yeah, and that sort of moving back an inch, like Jack said on Rob's channel, like it made him smell blood, and he was like, oh, he's not confident of that fight coming up, and whereas I'm actually like, bring it.
Oh mate, he was tamping after that game, wasn't he? It was like fucking high ground.
But no, it's yeah, good fun. But yeah, I'm enjoying using them. It's just very different mindset than the other armies I use, where it's full send. Like my beast, like I played Beastmen a lot in early edition. They're a full send army, whereas these, yeah, it's a bit more controlled play, and sort of just making sure you keep points, and if you can just pick off a few units, which is why I brought in sort of Pillar of Fire, which is really useful for just picking wounds up, especially paired with the Ironblasters. Like I can chew a few wounds off a chariot and then throw a Pillar of Fire through, finish that off, and that gives me some AP in the army as well. So my first game was against Empire, like a really heavily armored mounted Empire army, and I was like, oh, like how I've got nothing to, unless my tyrant can just run through everything. I've got nothing, like that bull unit is just gonna bounce off these things. Whereas then I was like, oh, let's try throw a Pillar of Fire through, take 4 wounds off Demiurge, take 3 knights out of the unit, and yeah, it's such an overpowered spell.
Oh, it's so good. The other thing is as well, like we're kind of entering in the worldwide kind of gaming sphere of old world, competitively, probably not so much at home and in clubs and stuff, but we're kind of entering into this zone of people are kind of trying to bring back the Death Star again, the the big line hammer units. Thanks to Andy. Cheers, mate. Uh, great guy, love him, but that army's ridiculous. But yeah,
Yeah,
like everyone's bringing out the big Death Stars, those big 200 blobs of skeletons and all that kind of stuff. And the ogres, where they weren't so good at the beginning of the edition because there's loads of MSU everywhere, suddenly they actually perform quite well into these Death Star units, because they can just kind of just charge forward and actually get the fights. Whereas you're not just like chasing down and getting shot at and stuff, which
yeah,
is
which
nice.
was what my issue was the first time I brought them. Were I could pick up a little unit of 5 here, a little unit of 5 here, but the rest of the stuff would just run circles around me, and I just couldn't get the points. And I had some Yetis in my list at that point. I had some Gorges in my list at that point, and they were really easy points to take from me, which meant I was always probably 400-500 points down from the start, pretty much because they were always going to die. So pretty much glass cannons. So like, yeah, I always needed to get at least one big unit or something just to be drawing level. Whereas this list, there's yeah 150 points which are easy to take from me, but my I'm quite confident in picking that up with one of those units is probably going to get a catapult, which is 100 points, and then another one might redirect something to give me a nice flank charge, and that's going to pick me up some points. So it's just making those small changes to lists to sort of make them work a bit better. But the meta is still so changing and advancing, as you said. Like, I'm sure next time I play, I'll be like, oh, actually, maybe I need to go back to something different, like that scout heavy list that I went with initially with the Yetis and Gorges. Maybe that'll start working better in the future when I need to get these these flank charges on these 80 lines of rangers and that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Just you can't just sit on a list at the minute and just expect it to continue to do well,
Yeah,
because
we're
everyone's coming for you, especially you.
that's it, man. I mean, we're almost a year into the edition, and I personally, and a lot of us, I don't actually, probably everyone in the competitive sphere, nobody's took the same list twice because the meta is constantly shifting. I say the word meta, like I actually hate that word, but the what's good is constantly shifting. Obviously, that might not be the case in your kind of like local club because obviously everybody is just kind of using what they've got or their favorite models and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
especially with the
But
armies that aren't released yet. Like,
yeah,
you gotta
yeah,
stick with what you've got,
100%.
or
Like
paying
GW,
extortionate eBay prices.
yeah, like Games Workshop has just been shit. Might as well 3D print everything, guys. There is a discount code down below. UK Resin print your armies, or you can get it printed for you. That's fine. But yeah, like the meta shifting at the top is so interesting, and it's really cool to see. And it's looking like there's going to be a nice little power shift soon. And ogres play into this very well. So if you are an ogre player and you haven't been playing because you've been looking at all of these stats online and you're like, ogres are terrible, they're really shit. They're not. Jack went 4-1 the other day, and he is a really good player, that's for sure, but he was playing into some other really, really good players, which means the army is good.
Yeah, I had the toughest strength of schedule in the event. I played against first, third, I was fourth, fifth, sixth, and 14th. And yeah, all really great players. So I played, your dwarfs, which won. Um, Played the strong greenskin list. I played Michael's Beastmen, which really always do really well. Jack's Skaven, which are just a nightmare for anyone. So and yeah, like I managed to come away with good wins in most of the games. One or two did rely on capturing objective points, which if this future these next sort of packs that GW are bringing out sort of start to bring in some more objective based scenarios, and hopefully it can only play to my strength.
Yeah, exactly. I think these rumored packs that are coming out, like if they do bring in objective based game, then that'd be really good. I am at the Welsh Open in February, and all of the missions are objective based. Which is interesting because it's comped that you can't go more than 10 wide. So I'm having to change my army.
I might actually drag some Noblars into my list if there's if you're looking at more than one. My issue, like game 5, I lost to Michael. Well, I won, but I lost the objective by one model because I just didn't have that many models in my army. So he had one block of 25 gore, and that outnumbered my whole army to start off with. So I probably might tweak my list a little bit just to have a couple of blocks of really cheap Noblars just to give me some numbers for these sort of objective things going forward as well.
Yeah, like I think if they do start to bring that in, that'd be really cool actually, because then it'll be a use for your Noblars as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd be useful to see. Obviously, there's all these sort of homebrew rule packs coming out now. Now there's a lot of these sort of local GTs going around, and a lot of them seem to be pulling them in as well. So rather than relying on just the sort of army rulebook missions. Interesting to see what comes out in the next 6 months or 12 months and how that evolves.
No, it should be quite good. So obviously you've talked about the stuff you like to use in the Mornfang and stuff, and the units that you kind of drop from your list, so like the Yetis and the Gorges, because they give points away too much. Is there anything that you want to try in the future? Like, have you tried lead belchers and stuff like that, or are you just going to stay away?
No, lead belchers unfortunately seem to have taken the biggest hit in the army.
They're so cool though.
They are cool, but they got nerfed so hard. Like, they used to be D6 shots each, and now you can get one good shot or D3, but only if you hit. They sort of then spawn into D3 hits, and there's such a poor ballistic skill. You're probably going to be suffering, and like they're not even something that'll stand up to a charge from a unit of 5 knights is probably going to blast through them if you sort of fumble. I would like to try the man-eaters. I know they've probably got a bit of play in them, but they're so expensive. So it's like the sort of droppable parts of my army are the Ironblasters. So it's either whether they go to Monfang, man-eaters. There's no real fun. I haven't tried sort of Stonehorns and Thundertusk just as the units. They're not going to stand. They're not sort of on par with taking a dragon. It's the tyrant on top which does the work. So I don't know how they'll fare just as sort of running them as special and rare.
There is a really fun list. I don't know if you've made it yet, but you can get 3 hunters on Stonehorn in the hero slot, so that fits. And then you take it's 2 Stonehorn and 1 Thundertusk, which is just amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite fun to play, but I'm not sure how it'd fare. I would like to get a hunter into my heroes, but my heroes are matched out currently, so he might just have to wait for the 3,000 point game, because I think he'd really add to the sort of Sabertusk. It removes the impetuous from the Sabertusk. It bumps the leadership up significantly. He's leadership 9. So I think he'd be quite handy, and I think he'd be a menace running around back lines. There's not many. Like, you're gonna have to leave something significant behind to defend against him. The sort of standard chaff isn't gonna hold him back. Whereas the Sabertusk it possibly might. But again, like just finding those points, and I've probably got 20 models on the table as it is. So like, the more these expensive things come in, the sort of model count's still dropping and dropping. So yeah, I'm hoping at some point points might sort of shift up towards 2,500 points as a standard, and that just gives me a bit more to play with. But then obviously it gives everyone else a bit more to play with as well, and whether that means you start seeing more tooled up, killy dragon characters, which is not going to be that helpful to my gameplay.
No, I mean, this is the problem. Like, you see a lot of people that want the points to increase. Like, I come from a 6th edition background, you come from an 8th edition background, where for my tournaments it was 2,250. So it was basically you get a 2,000 point army and then you get your lord for free. Basically, that was basically what it was. And obviously with yours it was a bit higher than that as well. And obviously like Tomb Kings and Bretonians got even more points.
Yeah.
But it's Yeah, I just think this edition, with how the list building is, I don't think it would work going into higher, because you go past 2K and then suddenly, yeah, cool, someone can bring an extra Chaos Dragon, someone can
Yeah,
bring,
or three
and
three
you're,
great brave shamans with Altai and that sort of stuff.
yeah,
I
like
wonder whether the sort of they could shift to sort of 25% Lords and Heroes as sort of eighth edition was for a long time, but then they've merged the Lords and Heroes now, so it's not quite as easy to completely categorize what's what. I mean, it's probably easily done, but it's not in the books what is Lords and what is Heroes, so it's not quite as easy to do that. But
yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
the
there
good
is
thing is
some,
my Tyrant is less than 500 points, so these mythical packs which might limit you to 500-point characters, I can still bring him.
which is always good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like there's a few characters that will get smashed back down if that comes out. But obviously that's staying, which is really good for you and really good for all the ogre players at home as well. So, have you got any advice for those budding ogre players out there?
Go big, go deep, and yeah, just try and you know. I think we're not an army that can go MSU aggressive. You've got to retain points and just try and pull points off where you can. I think it's probably quite difficult. If we get to those events where you're looking for, you've got to get maximum tournament points and you're looking for those 20 nils. I think ogres will probably struggle to get those top ends unless you get the perfect landslide through. But picking up those 12 eights, 13 sevens, 14 sixes, I think it's really doable with them, especially when you're just retaining so many points, unless you make a sort of a horrendous mistake or there's a sort of a brilliant play from your opponent. I think the majority of the time that you're good. So the it's 20 models. You can get that painted really quick. You get it on the table. They're still widely available. So yeah, just they're an easy army to start now and just sort of run with.
That's cheers, man. Yeah, I definitely think that they're probably monetarily the cheapest army to get into. And
200 quid,
also,
you probably have the full army.
yeah. And also, another rule that we kind of definitely glossed straight over. The reason why he's saying big and deep is because they come with a rule on the bulls that is it called gut charge?
Ogre charge.
Ogre charge. So basically, they get an extra point of AP for every rank they have. So suddenly, those impact hits have got either AP2 or AP3, depending how many models they've got behind them, which is
Yeah, and if
pretty
you
spicy,
get
actually.
that armor bane off, you can suddenly get an extra AP as well. They did get nerfed though. Like in the previous edition, if you charged over 10 inches, you'd get D3 impact hits instead of the standard impact hit. But they sort of got rid of that. So they did get hit hard with the nerf stick for uh, no reason. Like I don't understand why they got so many of the units got nerfed. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
It's the same as the dwarves. Like that's why
Yeah, but you
everyone's.
got you got fun, cool, fun new rules like drill, whereas we just got hit down and then like
Yeah, yeah.
stay down. We didn't gain any new fun stuff. Like yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that there's no confirmed plans of arcane journals bringing in new units. Hopefully at some point there'll be some sort of monstrous arcanum or storm of magic type supplement which brings in some monsters that are fun because we've got the giant and it's okay, but it's not something that's you're going to see in competitive play just because it's so easy to get points from.
Yeah, I think the thing is though, we don't know. Like Old World is so new, and obviously it sold so much better than Games Workshop anticipated that we could potentially get all of the legacy factions made into real factions.
Yeah, hopefully. And then I won't have to have a sort of homemade paperback. I can get a nice journal.
Oh, I've,
With
I've got
some.
one of them actually, right here. Oh.
Oh no. Um, so
Yeah, yeah, we're not advertising anything. It's fine, but I think the place you get them from has been taken down. Actually, I think
oh really?
GW got them. Yeah,
Oh
yeah, I think
dear.
they got
Oh dear.
them.
Just Google it, you'll find them. But yeah, I'm hoping we'll get something someday, but in the meantime, they're able to stand on their own 2 feet and sort of get some wins. So um, I think one of the issues is they're just not getting played. Like if you look at the stats on how how many like how many times they're being taken to tournaments, it's the second lowest behind Skaven, I think. So I think people are just yeah, like you said earlier, they've seen those initial results where people have been like, oh, we'll try the MSU tactics, which seems to be working for every other army, and it didn't work, and then people have gone, oh, never mind, I'll just buy Beastmen or buy Warriors of Chaos and just get a
Yeah.
dragon, and that's pretty much the whole army.
But this is the
Whereas,
thing, like you've got to be a hero. Pick one of the weaker factions. Like the thing is, we're seeing this loads. Like for instance, yourself with the ogres, like you're bringing their win rate up single-handedly. We've got Tom Carley with the Chaos Dwarves. Like the Chaos Dwarves will
although
sit on the
they've got the highest win rate out of all the armies.
yeah, they went from a 25% win rate to like the highest win rate out of any. So if you go on Old World rankings, you can check the win rates. And Chaos Dwarves are now sitting at the top because Tom Carley's win rate is 80%, which is pretty naughty. And then you've got like Jack Allen with the Skaven, and obviously like he brought the Empire up as well. Got the first worldwide GT win with Empire, which was pretty naughty. So you can win
He's
with
not far off with
anything.
Skaven as well. He's not far off getting those sort of. I think he's not far off getting that GT win with his Skaven.
Yeah, he'll get there. He'll get there. We just got to try and stop him. That's the thing.
that's my one job, just winning those jack-offs.
Jack off.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
For anyone that doesn't know and doesn't watch the Square Base show, basically at the kind of it's not my local anyway. It is Jack's local, but at the tournaments we like to go to, which were the Square Based events, Rob always seems to pair the two Jacks into each other. So every time they play, there's just a big group of us chanting Jack off around the table. And Jack did actually manage to win the last one. So have you won the last two, actually?
So I've won both the Ogres vs Skavens. I've won, which is the Square Base ones. But he did do me at Warhammer World with his Empire artillery Hellfest when I took some Beastmen. And I was like, I'll just hide in the corner, and then his cannonballs are bouncing over hills and through woods, and just caused a Termon mass panic because he obliterated a Jabba Slive, and my whole army just ran off the board. So I was like, yeah, okay.
I love it, man.
Get them back out the cupboard, get them on the table, give them a run through them. Like there are some good things in there. Just be prepared to buy lots of saber tusks. Keeping GW. The GW stocks must be like, what? Why are these selling so much currently? I'm just like, yeah, two more.
They are definitely the MVPs in the army. Right. Thank you so much for coming on, mate.
No worries. Anytime.
Awesome. Right. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
In the night of stone, we march so bold, with our sharp and heart so cold. Through halls of old, our vengeance sparks in shadows dark. It's Dawi after dark. For years untold and ledgers kept, where blood runs cold in caverns deep. The drums they roar will settle scores in Dawi lore. The grudge is held for years untold, in letters kept where blood runs cold. In caverns deep the drums they roar, will settle scores in Dawi lore. Under mountains watchful gaze, we'll end the feuds of ancient days. With iron will and spirit stark, we'll bring the light in Dawi after dark. Golden gems shall guide our fight through endless tunnels lost tonight. The hammer falls, the anvil sings, in Dawi's name our battle rings. The molten forges fuming red,